Hey guys, welcome to episode one of season three of Raw Talks. And I'm so excited for this episode. Super excited. Today we're going to be talking to my really good friend, Chris Minor Katiams. He's a really good friend of mine. I've known since college. We went to college together. And Chris is an amazing person. Chris is actually a licensed therapist. And he has been doing so much good work in the city of Tulsa by counseling young black men in the Tulsa community for the last 7 years. And from just talking to Chris and hearing about some of the stories and some of his interactions and just some of the people he's gotten to meet has really just challenged me in a way because I would love to share some of the things he shared with me on how we as a community can be better and the power of us focusing and dealing with our mental health. And so today we're going to be talking about how do black people, people of color in general, how do we deal with our mental health and why is there like a stigma in our communities and how do we get over that stigma, and also like how do we heal, as a community and also as a nation right now with everything going on, dealing with police brutality. And so Chris is going to be sharing some amazing insights and some amazing information. So please sit back, grab your coffee, grab your headphones and, listen to our really wonderful conversations. And I'll have his link in all of our information so you can support him, follow him on Instagram. He's also an amazing photographer. So guys, enjoy this episode and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Hey guys, welcome to Raw Talks episode 1 from season 3. I'm so glad to be here today, with my really good friend Chris Katiams. What's good, Chris?
How you doing, sir? How's it going?
Doing good. I've known Chris for a long time, actually. We went to college together, and we've just been in touch. And Chris is one of the most talented, most compassionate, most just amazing humans that I know. And some of the work that he does in his community is so like powerful. And then I feel like we can learn a few things about some of the things he does, especially in therapy. And bro, we're just gonna go straight to it. I know like me and you have talked a lot about, therapy, during this time, during this season. But one thing that we've talked about before that I want us to talk and I want you to share is like how do we deal with our mental health in this season? Like how do we heal as a community? And when I say the community, like I'm talking about like the black community, black people right now, with so much going on in our country. How can we take care of our mental health?
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm honored to be a part of Raw Talks. I've seen you, put it on the gram, the past year or so, and so like I'm honored, to be on any platform, just to, to promote mental health, especially within our community as Black people. So to answer your first question, I would definitely say that what we can do right now is we have to look for resources. We have to look for ways to help each other out. I think, like as I've always said, there's so much that is so much deeper than George Floyd's death, and Breonna and Ahmaud. It's such a deep historical context, to it. And so because of that, we have to dig deep as a community in regards to our mental health, because that's the reason why you're having these triggered responses, from us where we're protesting, but then there's so many different ways that we're displaying that protest, and there's so much anger and there's so much pain and so much unresolved challenges going on, unresolved issues. I like to say that America is going through its family therapy, and there's certain people who don't like to be in therapy. We had this conversation, and because of that, that's what makes it hard. So when you hear people saying, "Well, why should they protest?" and that's a family member within the family therapy structure who does not like accountability, does not want to be held responsible for certain things that have affected the other people in the family. And so our way of healing as a community is looking into resources. And one of those resources, obviously, is therapy, is seeking out mental health practitioners. I host a live with, another phenomenal therapist, and we had um 6 Black therapists online 2 Fridays ago, and we had the conversation about what can we do? What is our role right now? And it
Yeah.
was so great to hear what other people had to say, because the role is to just make ourselves more visible, because Black folks, we stay in trauma and we normalize that ish. We
Yeah.
normalize it so much,
Yeah.
and we just feel like it's a way of life. And so you need therapy because it helps you identify those behavioral patterns, that you've been
Mhm.
used to, that you have
Yeah.
taken as a norm. So therapy, amongst so many other things, is one way that we can heal, because we have to do the work on the inside.
Yeah.
If if white people are not trying to get on the same page, does that mean that we're doomed? We still got to do that inner work. So
Yeah.
just to answer your question, yeah,
No, I love that you say that, and I love
right,
the analogy about, being a family, having a family therapy session and making sure that we are taking that initiative and working on ourselves. And I think like
absolutely,
when we are trying to do that, there's something that we deal with even as a community. It's like, why why do we have that mental health stigma? Why is it that when someone says like, man, I'm dealing with my mental health, or I'm trying to make sure my mental health is, is solid, is whole, there's kind of like a stigma like, oh, are you crazy? Like, why do you need a therapist? Like, why do we have that, bro? And how can you break that down for us? Like, why is that kind of like a shadow or dark cloud around people being transparent about, dealing with their mental health?
absolutely. So again, I always look at everything with a historical narrative. First of all, there's a lack of trust within Black folks. We don't
Hmm.
trust people easily. Me being almost 7 years as a therapist, within the Black community, I get to see that. Being a Black man myself and seeing how my family operates, I get
Yeah.
to see that. When you look at the historical context in which Black people had to go through slavery and colonization, and there was a lot of betrayal, there's that lack of trust when it comes to an authority figure. There's that lack of trust, and we're seeing it now with the police as well, where there's a
Yeah.
lack of trust in what so how you do things in one area of your life is kind of how you do things in every other area. So you have Black folks who don't trust the police. They don't
Yeah.
trust you know the any form of authority, and so it's hard to trust a therapist because you have to be vulnerable, and
Mm.
we don't like being vulnerable. We like to seem strong. We have so much pain, and we age good. We look good on the outside
Hmm.
because Black
Hmm.
don't crack, but we're
Yeah.
cracking inside. This was a quote I
Wow.
saw online. We're cracking inside. It's so much internal work that needs to be done. But the vulnerability aspect almost means for us sometimes that we are relinquishing our control of our
Yeah.
emotions. And so then we feel like, I don't want to go into therapy. I think another thing is accountability. Accountability is hard for us to do as human beings, period.
Yeah.
But I think within our community, when we're being held accountable, it almost seems like an attack sometimes. And so when you go to therapy, at least if you're going to a really good therapist who knows what they're doing, they're going to
Yeah.
hold you accountable for a lot of things, and kind of connect the dots in terms of how your actions and your choices affect your behavior, and your life. And so you have a lot of times where we don't like being held accountable for certain things, so we avoid therapy. Lack of psycho education, that's another one, and that's what I try to promote. I've had clients who've come up to me and be like, "Man, I don't like therapy. I've never been in it, but I don't
Hmm.
want to," and they shut it down. And so it's my job and duty as a therapist to psychoeducate you on why you need it, and also make you realize that as a therapist, I need therapy too,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
it's a heavy job that we have, and I have, it's constantly revolving. Like right now, after this meeting, I have another client to attend to, before I do my whole Father's Day thing. But you have these structures in place within our community where we're not educated in terms of what therapy does for us, and that it's a healing tool, and that
Mm.
it is not the therapist's intention to judge you or to make you feel bad or to uh, throw out your issues in front of your face. you know. And I think that the more people realize that that being psychoeducated on therapy is a good thing and it has value, it changes the game. You see things
Yeah.
different. Now
Right.
you're like, oh, I'm not going into therapy because I'm a bad person. I'm going into therapy because I'm a good person who bad things happen to, and I
Mm.
want to do better. I'm self-aware enough, and that self-awareness is the first step. When you're
Yeah.
self-aware that, hey, it's some stuff I need to work through,
Yeah.
then you know it makes it changes the game. You know, I think lastly, as Black people, a lot, especially when I work with you know Black women,
Yeah.
there's this feeling of being a burden, you know.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
even had this conversation with a good friend of mine who I finally won him over to therapy, and he hit me up for a
Wow.
referral just 2 days ago. But you know, even for someone like him, or even women who I've worked with, Black women, it's this thing of I don't want to be a burden to a therapist. I don't, because we're not always
Mm.
used to being able to be in a space where
Yeah.
no one needs anything from us
From
and
us. Yeah.
we're just being ourselves, you know. And so sometimes that's really hard to do because we just feel like I'm always out here serving people and I think about myself last. So imagine being in a space where it's all about you and the
Yeah.
therapist is committed to your own process. It ain't got nothing to do with the therapist or their biases. It's all
Hmm.
about you. That's tough, you know. So it's so many variables to, you know, I'd say many factors to why we just don't seek therapy.
Yeah. I think that's a great point that you bring. Like, I think it was my sister that was telling me one time, like, she's like, I think Black people are the most empathetic people,
Yes.
just
Yes.
because, like, we've gone through so much, we've
Yeah.
suffered through so many traumatic experiences, whether you're talking about slavery or police brutality, or even just like racial biases in the workplace.
Yeah.
So to actually be in a space and we understand that, therapy is for us, or like, there's not something we have to give or something that's going to be ripped away from us, but it's a place that we can be safe. I,
Yes.
I think about how many safe places are there in America and the world for Black people,
Well,
you
I'll tell
know?
you where. One of the safe spaces for Black folks, especially us as Black men, is the barbershop. That
Yeah,
is our main point of, you know, connection. You know, that's where we really get to be ourselves and be open. But then the thing is, your barber still got other heads to cut. You know,
yeah,
and after you know he's worked, you know, done cut your hair, you got to move on to the next client. You know,
yeah,
but you know your therapist really is there, like I said, you know, to commit to the process, you know, and
yeah,
to say, hey, these are the days we have to meet and this is why, you know. So you're so right in that, is that we don't we don't even feel safe a lot of times, and so we don't even know what a safe space looks like, you know.
hmm,
And so people like myself, we're here to kind of break that mold, you know, and change the direction, you know. And to be honest, I have to say, since COVID started, I've been on other platforms, you know, and talking about conversations like this about mental health in the Black community. And bro, it's been so many Black brothers who've hit me up around the country after
wow,
I'll have Zoom conferences or, you know, other platforms. And
hmm,
they just be like, bro, could you be my therapist? Or if your caseload is full, could I, you know, could you sign, you know, could you
wow.
refer me to someone? And for, I'm so grateful for, I'm sorry, I'm so
You good,
grateful
you good.
for, I'm so grateful for the many, sorry, I'm so grateful for the many brothers, you know, that I get to work with, because
Yeah,
they're therapists as well. And us as Black men, we call ourselves Black male therapists. We call ourselves unicorns because it's so few of
it's
us out
rare.
here.
It's
So we're a
rare.
band of brothers around the
Yeah,
country, and we connect with each other a lot. And so those years of connecting and networking has now provided opportunities like this when other brothers hit me up to say, "Hey, I need therapy," and I'm in this day. I'm like, "Yo, I know my bro who's a phenomenal therapist, and he out
mm,
here in DC with you. I can
yeah,
hook you up." You know, and
that's
that's what it's
perfect.
all about. It's building that band of brotherhood and accountability. You know, so when you
Yeah,
talk about safe spaces, I'm trying. I want us to move not from the barbershop setting to the therapy, you know,
yeah,
setting.
yeah. I love that you touched on the barbershop because for
Yeah.
me, as a young, Black kid, like
Yeah.
those were the places where I heard the conversations, right? Of other
Yes.
black men talking about
Yes.
the state of the nation, of how we should do with things, of how we should see things. And a lot of, I feel like, young black men's perspective are kind of like shaped in the barbershop because you learn so much and you see an area of vulnerability from,
Mhm.
you know, black men. Like they share about like how they feel about their relationships, what they're dealing in their life, their financial struggle. So you
Yes.
see that. And I'm glad that we're in a place, we're in a season of life where that is starting to progress into an actual being with a therapist, right? And not just
Yes.
saying when I get a cut, that's 20 to 30 minutes long or short. So
Hmm.
no, that's really exciting. And just leading to from that is like how do we deal, you know, with our mental health, bro, with like the trauma of police brutality. And the reason why I say that, and I know for me, just seeing what happened to George Floyd, you know, and just everyone else, the names, the hashtags, like as a black person, as a black man, that can be traumatizing because so many times you put yourself in their shoe, or it makes you recollect the scenarios that you know
Yes.
you had to go through. And I know that was my trauma. It was like going through those memories of when I was pulled over and when that
Mm.
felt like, is this it? You know what I'm saying? Or what was going to happen? Or just that, you know, that trepidation of like, wow, like I can't predict what's going to happen. Like, I don't know. So I need to make sure I'm good, you know? So, but how do we deal with that trauma?
Bro, and I'm glad they used the T word. Like I tell my clients, I'm like, yo, what's the T word? And they know it's trauma. I'm like, and if they forget, I say it rhymes with drama, so they get it.
Yeah.
But
Love
no,
that.
I'm glad you used the word trauma because that's what it is. When you look at what trauma is, it is any stressful
Mm,
event that can be long lasting, that affects your emotions, your behavior, and your thoughts. And those things, when we have traumas, we also have trauma triggers and trauma responses. Now, the trauma triggers are the reminders of the trauma. So I've seen situations where a woman who was raped, right? That was a traumatic experience for her.
wow.
And so then she goes, she went somewhere in public years afterwards when she thought she was good, and immediately someone in the room had the same cologne that the guy who raped her had, and it
Wow.
triggered her. That was a trauma trigger right there. And so after a trauma trigger, you get a traumatic response. And so it was like she had to leave. She had to find a way to get out of that space because
Wow.
she was reliving that trauma all over
Hmm.
again. So trauma triggers don't always make sense. And when educating even white folks about that, when you see the different trauma triggers that we have, in terms of how people are protesting and how people are
Yeah.
handling, racism as far as black folks, it's not going to make sense if you don't understand the history that comes behind that. And
Yeah.
so when we look at police brutality, we're looking at how race and authority can be lethal. That
Mm,
is that combo
yeah.
problem. And that's what we're dealing with right now, where black folks are there's so many triggers that we have, and even as a black man, like I am honest with my clients that, before being a therapist, I'm a black man and I have these
Mm,
experiences. I have these, sensations that come over me when a police officer is even driving behind me,
I know.
so sometimes some of the triggers that we have are, seeing red and blue lights flashing. It could even be an emergency, not even a cop car, but just
Yeah.
those lights flashing could be a
Yeah.
trigger. Sometimes it's even hearing gunshots. Sometimes it's seeing handcuffs. Sometimes it's certain movies that have to deal with police brutality that become a trigger. Someone could be watching Mall Cop and still be triggered from that.
Yeah.
And that's a comedy, but they could still be triggered from that. You
Yeah.
know,
Just, and I just wanted, like, sorry I cut you off.
yes,
I think it's really important you talked about the trigger because, like, and I know
yes,
for me personally, I've struggled with watching shows that detail police brutality
yes.
or just that kind of like show, like anything that has to do with, I guess, even in the justice system, like
Yes.
cops getting away with murders, black people, because that triggers me, bro.
Yep.
Honestly, it does. and I just can't go through that trauma process again of like watching that even in a fictitious sense, or even based on a true story sense. So I just want to like reiterate, like those triggers are real, and I just kind of like
Bro.
exemplify my triggers, when it comes to just even when it comes to police brutality.
No, absolutely. And I love your vulnerability about that, because we have to. This is part of the healing process, is being honest about how these things affect us. We could be successful. You could be a brother in the hood, but you could be a brother who lives in a white neighborhood, and still we have that common thread of fear when the police pull us over, because at the end of the day, it's not about what you do. It's about, in that moment, you're a Black man, you're a Black woman, And so even when we think about just the panic and anxiety that serve as triggers, for us, I also look at the youth, because I work extensively and I put in so much work when it comes to my community, the Black community, Black young males, and for almost 7 years, I've been working with Black males who range from 5 to 19, almost 20 now. And so the conversations are so different, and what I'm doing right now with, like I always say, it always takes back to a historical narrative. And I'm still answering your question about the police brutality and what we can do, because in therapy, the past month since all this has happened, I have had to handle therapy in a different way, with a historical aspect, because a lot of our Black youth aren't even historically informed about Black history.
It's true,
what
because
I've
it
had
wasn't
to
taught
do,
to us in the education
exactly,
system.
absolutely. So now I have to take on the job of doing a lot of research, of putting together how history and mental health are connected. So my sessions, some of them have looked like, okay, let's break down some of the mental health challenges that we think African slaves went through. Let's look into that. Let's break it down, because I need you to be empathetic, but I also need you to understand the history in which our people, even though they had a lot of mental health challenges because of the high doses of adversity they went through, they also were resilient.
Yeah.
They were resilient. And I think that when we look back on our history in terms of how Black people have historically been resilient, that's also, that adds to the confidence of a young Black male. Because I promise you, like I said, with race and authority being lethal, a lot of it affects our youth because of lack of confidence. They lose their self-esteem the minute they see a police officer show up. They don't know how to speak up. I've talked to some of my young males that I work with, and they've had various responses to that, various traumatic responses. There's no confidence, they're scared of authority, they're vulnerable, they feel threatened, it's reminders of other traumas, it's reminders of witnessing killings, that have just happened within the neighborhood, and so putting that historical narrative in regards to, this is where our people come from, and these are the experiences that they had, and then how does that link with us? Because that's what intergenerational trauma is all about, is that I don't have to have been through the exact challenges that my forefathers went through, but I carry those traits. I carry that DNA. And somewhere in there, when I dig deep, there is a lot there is a lot of trauma that I don't even realize. There's certain ways that I'm responding and being triggered that go all the way back to African slavery, that go all the way back to colonization, that go all the way back to, the Jim Crow system and all that. And so it's important for us to understand our history from that perspective, because then we know that when we're in positions where we can't be of control when it comes to police, we, now we have to figure out, how do we navigate that? Because here's the thing, race and authority is lethal, because when you had Black slaves and white masters, that was lethal. We're just seeing a modernized version of that. And so now we have the tools that our ancestors didn't get to have, and now police are being held responsible for a lot of the things that a lot of the brutality. And that's not to say that all police are bad, But when we're trying to look for solutions, one of the things that I'd say is that we got to put the police department on a higher standard when it comes to the standard that it takes to be a therapist. For example, you got to go through so much hoops. You got to go through licensure. You got to go through national and state exams. The same thing for doctors. The same thing for even barbers. There's so many trainings that need to happen, for you to be qualified to be in the position you're in. And one of those trainings has to be cultural competency. You cannot be a police officer who has been stationed within the Black community and you don't know how to relate with them. And not to say that we're perfect as a community,
Wow.
but you have to. You have to, because trauma-informed trainings, those are key. You have to have trauma-informed trainings. You have to understand that however you respond in a situation affects the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at Rashad, when I watched that video, I wasn't just looking at him getting killed. I was looking at the environment. The police officer wasn't aware of the environment with which he was in, because what you did in that moment was in a Taco Bell or Wendy's. I'm sorry, it was at Wendy's. Yeah. And that's where people go to get food. How many kids were in those cars lined up watching that incident? How many families who were hungry suddenly lost their appetite when they saw that? So police also have to be careful about the environment in which they decide to shoot. Not that there's any environment that's conducive, obviously, but then just to look at Rashad's situation, you have to be aware. You see the 17-year-old girl with who recorded the George Floyd tragedy.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about that girl every other day, and I'm like, she can't erase that off her mind.
Never.
So police have to be trauma informed. If it means incorporating those of us who are in the mental health field within the police department to be that buffer, to be that that middleman, then so be it. But there has to be change. Defunding the police ain't enough. You gotta incorporate different systems in place. The DAs cannot be connected to the police department.
No.
So this is just kind of what, these are the ways, these are the solutions to how we can deal with that police brutality, and healing takes time. It's not overnight, so that would be my response in a long way to that.
And I agree with, we've talked about some of these before, but even some of the new things you're saying, like I completely agree with, and which leads me to the next question about like how, because some of those things you said, like we have to come as a country to inform those policies, to add those statutes. But for the things that focusing on those things that we can control, that we can play a part of, but focusing on the things that we can't control, is how can we heal as a community? What are some things that we can do right now to really take that step forward? Because it's one thing to deal with our trauma, but still deal with the rage. You know what I'm saying? Like still having all that. I don't say maybe hatred. Yes, hatred, anger, pain. But how do we get to the place from definitely feeling those emotions and going through that to actually healing?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and like I said, healing takes time.
Yeah.
When we go into therapy, a lot of times we feel like we have to, that we have to get it all figured out within the first 5 sessions. And if the therapist can't get it done within that time, then that's it. So that's why I keep reiterating the fact that there's a historical narrative to our whole community. And so when you're dealing with history, first of all, you got to be educated about the history.
Wow.
Because if you ain't educated about the history, how do you even go about healing? So that education about history is so key. We don't know. Things like Black Wall Street and all these new things that are coming up, Seneca Village and all these are new. This is new information for us. We think it's only the white community that's now learning. We're learning so much about
We're learning too.
Yeah.
I'm learning too.
And so we have to be educated about our history and where we come from, because we will see common threads of resilience in the midst of pain. And that's the reason why, like I said, I'd like to bring that up in therapy with my clients, where I say, hey, let's look at let's dig deep. Let me show you some videos on what slavery looked like, and
Wow.
what it meant to be taken from your land as an African slave to be brought to America or to be spread across. What it took, and then let's identify those traumas. Let's look at what do you think happened to a slave, or how do you think they felt when their families had to be separated from them, when they try to run away, the anxieties that they dealt with, the depression that they went through, the it's so many variables, so
So
many
many
things.
layers, yeah,
And
and
so
even
it's
trying to process how to escape,
yes,
imprisonment, slavery, while you're dealing with,
yes,
that trauma of just like trying to, how do I get free? How do I deal with
yes,
the things I can't control and the things I can control? Like,
yeah.
I can't even imagine.
So yes, we were good with being resilient, right? But then we did it at the cost of never getting the healing. And so
Mm,
our ancestors just ended up transferring all that to us because there was no space. There was no space for them to heal. There was no time to heal because even when we celebrate Juneteenth, after Juneteenth was after Juneteenth happened, that was not the end. You still had segregation on a whole nother level. It was a whole nother fight.
there's a whole nother
So there
thing.
was no space to heal. And one of my clients, oh, he's 15 years old, and we had a therapy session on Friday. And I told him, I said that, what do you think therapy would have looked like for our ancestors as slaves? And he said,
Wow.
yo, Mr. Chris, they he said, I think that therapy sessions would be booked all the way because black folks would have so much to talk about that they wouldn't even be able to stop. And he said, but I think that black people's quality of life would be increased because they would have a lot to talk about in therapy. But then a lot of the white slave masters would not have thought therapy was important to them. So even though they were still going to be in authority, the quality of life for black people would be better because they would be more open and they would be talking more and they would have a safe space. And I thought that was powerful. I
Yeah.
applauded him. I was like, that's what I'm trying to get up out of you because I
Yeah.
need you to understand there is healing connected to you when you're aware of that.
Yeah. And the powerful part about that statement for me is them going through that process and
Yes.
passing down that tradition.
Yes.
So you passing down not just trauma, you passing down wholeness to your
Yes.
children, and your children
Yes.
are passing that down. Like that becomes the norm, not
That's
tragedy, not
inheritance.
traumatic. It becomes the inheritance. Like, you
Yeah.
need to be whole, and this is the
Yeah.
way we do that. And
Yeah.
to me, that's powerful, bro.
Yeah. So when you ask about how we can heal as a community, it's identifying that our trauma isn't a norm. So I understand that my trauma isn't a norm. And so when I'm self-aware of that, I start to look for ways to heal. And part of
Wow.
my healing is educating myself on my history. Then after that, I seek the therapy that is needed. I open myself to therapy and say, hey, that's the space that I can get the healing from. But then I also surround myself with a good, strong support system where I
Yeah.
have people who are rooting for me, and I have a band of brothers who are going through the same thing. So
Yeah.
for me, my modes of connection sometimes are with my brothers in therapy. Because we go through the same struggle. But it
Yeah.
makes us stronger because we get to connect and say, "Yo, that's how I feel being a black male therapist," and they're like, "Yo,
Wow.
I get that." And so
Yeah.
we need that within our community where we can relate with each other, where we can be empathetic towards each other, where parents are also modeling healthy behaviors, right? Parents are
Yep.
able to model healthy behaviors on this is this is not the norm. Me cussing you out or me, and you'll hear like a lot of black parents who I really call out on when they say, "Oh, my kid, he bad," or what. No, he's not bad. He's a good kid. He just makes bad choices. You got to separate that because the
Yep.
identity factor for a black
It's
male, and I put this
huge.
quote out, the identity for a black child, period, the identity crises that goes on in regards to just being raised in the black community and what you have to do. I have 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds who have been told by their uncles, if you ain't having sex by now, you're gay. So you deal with that identity crises alone. But then what
Wow.
happens when that black kid transitions into being resilient enough to get out of the hood? now they have a whole new identity because now they got to switch codes because they're working within a white corporation.
Yeah.
So then who are we? Where does our identity lie when we're in our community and we don't feel like we are ourselves? And then when we're out there where we're in white spaces, we can't be ourselves either. So it goes back to, we got to dig deep into our identity, into our history, and into the trauma we're going through, because we have intergenerational trauma. We have trauma of just what it's like being a Black person in general every day. And then we have real-time trauma, because the real-time trauma is the things that we see every time you turn on CNN. It's a whole new storyline coming up. It's a whole new tragedy. So it's like we have these three areas to work through.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Like, the way you're bringing things down is so powerful.
Absolutely.
And as we, just finalize, I'll talk real quick. Something I love about you, and something I respect and admire about you, that a lot of people don't know, and I think sometimes there might be maybe a stigma of, even if that's possible, is that you're a person of faith, and I'm also a person of faith.
Absolutely.
And for me, like, I find it interesting about people of faith who are in therapy, but another factor is that you're Black. So you're a Black man who's a therapist, but also a person of faith, which is a bunch of things that layers that you have to like juggle and figure out.
Yes.
So, but with that, there's also a stigma, because like there's a stigma of therapy in the Black community. Then also there's a stigma of therapy in being a person of faith. So imagine being a Black person who's a person of faith, dealing with the stigma of therapy. And I just wanted you to just break that down, because like I know people who are watching this, not everybody is a Christian, but those who are, or who are people of faith, who are trying to figure out like, how does this go in hand? How does this go in hand with my faith, and how do I balance the two?
Mm-hmm. So that's a terrific question right there, because faith has a lot to do with therapy. And if we're putting the two together, therapy and mental health, therapy and faith, it's strong right there. And the reason why I say that is because when we look at our relationship with God, He requires us to relinquish any form of control that we have. And He requires us to really, be laid back and just say, hey, God, you're in control. You handle the wheel. I'm not in control of this. And so that point of surrender is the same thing that we need to do in therapy, where we can walk into a space and say, I'm opening up, I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm doing it not at the expense of my own ego, but because I identify that I need this healing. Wow. And so the only way that healing can happen is that self-awareness, is knowing that the same way that I can trust God is the same way that the people that He has aligned to serve me in a mental health framework can do the same thing for me, and they can, and I need to be open to that, so you can't have a relationship with God without trust and without faith. And so we don't trust easily as Black people generally. We have to learn that if I'm going to trust God, I also need to trust the people that He's put in front of me, to serve me in that mental health framework, like I said. I think another thing is in therapy, and I've said this with other friends, is faith, I guess the synonym for faith in therapy is self-fulfilling prophecy. And so self-fulfilling prophecy within therapy is when your beliefs and your thoughts are influenced by your behavior on a subconscious level, and so self-fulfilling prophecy says you could have negative or positive self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just up to you. I mean, if you wake up in the morning and you hit your toe on the bed, and then you had a bad dream, and you're not able to get in that workout you needed, or the day just starts going crazy. Whatever you say to yourself is what will manifest. Because it's not about the circumstances around you, it's about your cognitive process. And I always break it down in cognitive behavioral therapy that we have our thoughts first, then we have our feelings, and then our behavior. And so if we're able to be self-aware that these three things happen in a certain order, we also see the same thing in regards to our faith. That the way faith is presented to us is your thought process has to switch
Yep.
before, and then your feelings, because sometimes your feelings will lie to you, and you have to go based off of what your thought process is, what you believe. So that's what self-fulfilling prophecy is. I told a friend, I was like, Dave, when it came to David fighting Goliath, David was on top of his mental health game, because he knew he knew he practiced self-fulfilling prophecy. And the reason why I say that is because he knew that his psyche had to be on point. If his psyche wasn't on point, he was going to look at that Goliath like he was what he really was. And so he had to practice and manifest self-fulfilling prophecy to realize that it is his thought process that influences what he's about to do to this giant.
Yeah.
And so because of that, that's how he was able to win, because he had to change his mind. And it's the same thing when it comes to what we're currently dealing with within this climate, is that in order to prepare for battle when it comes to racial inequality, us as Black folks, we got to take care of our psyche the same way David did. We have to take care of our mental health. We can go off of emotion, but then at the end of the day, we can go off of emotion. We can even get reparations, but has the healing taken place on the inside? Yeah. Because you can't prepare for war if your mind ain't right. You can't prepare for war if you're dealing with anxieties. You will flip out on yourself.
Yeah.
You will flip out on yourself. You'll find yourself fighting for the wrong side, and so that's what we need to do. That is the requirement that I have for our people, in as much as we have a laundry list of requirements for white folks, because they're doing their homework right now. We have a laundry list of things that we need to do for ourselves, because like I said, if this is just a trend and being Black is just a trend for now, and it never becomes what we expect it to be, does that mean we're stuck? Does that mean that it's over for us? If white corporations don't decide to really be fundamental about change, not just because it's trending right now, does that mean it's over for us? And so the answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer is no, because when we work on our insides, we're better able to figure out how to navigate things. We're able to carry the resilience that our ancestors had with us in order to be who we are. And so then that's when you're going to start seeing generational wealth transfer. You're going to start seeing, transformations within family dynamics in terms of change of mindset. You're going to see proper modeling behavior. You're going to see a lot of affirmation, and you're going to see a lot of confidence, within our community, and healing. And when those things come together, man, they ain't ready. They ain't ready. They think they are, but they ain't ready. They not.
I love that, bro. I love your analogy of, David, because I think about what's so powerful about the analogy and preparing for battle was we forget that there were the army of Israel's army were there, and they were afraid of Goliath.
Yes.
They weren't mentally ready. Even his brothers, right?
Yes.
It took one man who saw beyond what they could see and had that self-belief and that fulfilling prophecy. I love that analogy, bro. Like, that's so beautiful.
Absolutely.
And bro, as we wrap up, what is one thing or two things that you could say, like, you wish people knew about therapy, that people don't know?
Right. I mean, I could sell you all day long at the end of the day, but what I would say is that based off of the experience of the clients that I've worked with and friends who have sought therapy, I know that it's not easy, it's not easy what you're about to embark on. If you are open to therapy, it's not easy. And it's not easy because when you've put a lot of things under the rug, unresolved issues, when they come back, sometimes it's traumatic, right? And even when I've had so many clients over the years where simply bringing up the past has served to be traumatic for them,
Wow.
And so So because of that, because they have to relive those things and they've hidden it somewhere. But then just because it's hidden doesn't mean it don't exist. I could put
Wow.
something in my
Okay.
closet right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and just because it's in there and I don't see it, doesn't mean that if I open the door, it's not going to be there.
Mm.
It's still going to be there. And so it's like, what would you rather do? Would you rather, you know, keep it hidden? That way you don't have to see it or address it? Or would
Yeah.
you rather face it on? And so that's where self awareness comes in. So, first of all, therapy is not going to be easy,
Mm.
but the healing and the progress and the growth you see, I think that's the greatest accomplishment for me. Because as a therapist, you don't get paid much, but then when you get to see the ultimate reward is when your client, you see that growth. They
You see
talk
that
different.
change.
They,
Yeah.
they even walk into your office different.
That
They ain't walking the same.
transformation,
Bro, it
their
is lethal.
mentality.
It
Wow.
is lethal.
That's
When
beautiful,
you
bro.
start seeing them, and sometimes clients don't even realize it. I have to be the one to say, you know what? You didn't used to walk this way with this level of authority and
Yeah.
affirmation when you first came the first day. And here you are. And so that is enough to say, hey, it's worth it. Because anything that concerns me, I have to work through that. If my car looks beautiful on the inside, but I'm constantly paying to get it fixed, but I'm not
Every
actually going
day.
for the right solution, I'll be driving that car like it would give me so many problems. But then the thing is, I'll be used to it. I'll figure out how to normalize it. And
Or
that's where it
mask it.
becomes dangerous. Yes.
Yeah.
Because I'll just be like, you know what? Maybe that's how all cars drive. So I'm gonna just drive like
Mm.
that. And I'm gonna just manage. We like to manage things, and so you just keep doing that. But then you don't realize that there's a different life. So we're so used to the struggle that we don't even know what it's like to be free and to not have to stress. And some of us are addicted to the stress and the trauma and the drama and the
Wow.
all that. We're so addicted to it that to the point where our psyches, when you think scientifically, our psyche actually convinces us that if you step out of your comfort zone, it's abnormal. There is something wrong with you because you don't
Yeah.
know what the result is going to look like.
On the other
And
side
on the
of
other
like
side,
healing and progress.
yes. And so that's the thing is a comfort zone always serves its purpose because its purpose is to let you know that this is all predictable. You know how this is going to end. So even if you're in an abusive relationship, you know how it's going to end and it's safer.
Wow.
It's so much safer. So that's how deep our brains, our psyche will convince us because it's been trained over time that this is how we need to respond to certain situations. We've been conditioned. So then we stick to that. We stick to that program, and it takes a lot of breaking the mold to really get you there. And sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years, even when you're self aware, just depend on how deep, things have gotten and for
Yeah.
how long it's been a norm. So that's just what I want people to know that it's tough, but it's so rewarding because
Yeah.
you're gonna be living your best life. When we talk about when I see Jay-Z and Kanye and all them talk about how black excellence, and black excellence is to them a lifestyle of wealth. They have attained wealth. But what about the mental health wealth? Because
Mm.
that's the true form
And
of
that's
black excellence.
self-awareness. Yeah, that
Yes,
is,
bro.
yeah.
Black excellence is my mind being right. If my mind is right, if I'm seeking therapy and I'm going for it, everything is good.
Yeah.
My kids are going to be good. The way I work is going to be different. The way I navigate racism
Your
is going to be different.
relationships too are
Everything.
gonna be healthy,
Everything.
gonna be whole. Yeah.
That is the true form of black excellence. So whoever know Jay-Z and Kanye, they need to redefine what that means because it's
Yeah.
not about popping Ciroc and vodka. Like it's so many, it's so much
Mm.
deeper than that. Our black excellence comes from us identifying our history, comparing it to the right now, what we're dealing with, and getting that healing. Because we're going to be doing something that our ancestors never got the opportunity to do because they
Yeah.
never had the chance to do that.
Wow. Wow. That's bro, that's amazing.
Bro,
This has
man.
definitely been a raw talk. real,
Yes.
authentic, like authentic and
Yes.
whole in every shape, in every way. Bro, I just want to say, like, I love you, man. I love what
I
you're
love you,
doing.
bro.
Like, you're doing so much in
Thank you.
your community, in the Black community. And I know you touched on just a few of what you're doing with like young Black men and some of even the stories that you told me. And
Yes.
this wasn't planned, but I want to like just want you to talk about something unique about you, which
Okay.
earlier we talked about, because I think it just goes a long way to really exemplify the kind of person that you are. And
Thank you.
if you're okay with it, like just sharing about,
Yeah.
you know, like today's Father's Day
Yeah.
and and what
Yeah.
that means to you, bro, like in this season.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. You know, so first of all, before I even delve into that, I have to say that I try to put photography and mental health together. I try to incorporate those two things. But for those of you listening, the only reason why I'm even doing photography is because of David. David was the one who
Stop.
gave me my first shot when it came to doing photography. It was an engagement shoot. And since then, you know, it's just been an amazing journey. So with my photography, I really incorporate mental health into it. You know, I bring a mental health perspective. And my niche is really with Black men's fashion, you know, and just we look good on the outside, but there's so much inner work. But in terms of, you know, Father's Day, it's an honor. You know, I get to take my boy out, you know, to I don't know what we're going to do because everything is closed. But
Yeah.
it's a blessing. It's a blessing because fatherhood comes in different forms. Whether you're a mentor or a spiritual dad or a biological dad, you know, or you're an uncle, you're a teacher, you know, you're a therapist, whatever. It comes in different forms, and so I just realized how much important it is, you know, to be in a child's life. And I think for me, one of the hardest things about being a dad is the fact that you have to let your kids experience certain things.
Yeah.
It's so
you
hard.
can't, you can't give that experience to them. You know, they have to have it for themselves.
Ooh, and it's so hard because you can see them going into that fire and you're like, yo, I'm putting all the sirens on, please stay away. And they just want to go. It just looks addictive. And you have to learn how to let them do it.
Yeah.
Don't stress out.
Yeah.
You know,
it's kind of like them seeing the fire, like you were a kid, you seen the fire.
Yes.
And like you need to feel the burn to know, like, oh,
yes,
I will never try to put my hand.
I will never try that again. But you got some. You got some who will still go back into the fire a couple more times. You know, but but I think that for me, it's just been a blessing, man. It's been a blessing because you get to change the life of your kid, and they get to see you through. You know, they get to see themselves through you. And you have to model the right behavior. And you also have to show your imperfections. You have to be raw about it. We're talking about raw talks. You got to be raw as a dad and say, hey, I struggle. Yes, you might see me as Superman or whatever, but I struggle and I have my challenges. And that builds the relationship and the bond, you know. So being a dad is an honor. You know, it's a blessing, and it's hard, it's sacrificial, you know, but it's so good. Because to me, right now, there are times where I'm like, I just want to sleep. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to be responsible for anything or anybody. But you got a job to do, and it doesn't end. You know. So yeah, and shout out to all the great dads out there. You know, we are out here killing it.
Black dads are killing it.
Black dads are killing it. Yeah, out here.
Yeah. Well, bro, I just want to say again, thank you, man. Thank you for being on. I knew when I was starting the season, you were the first person that I thought about. Like, I knew, like, I needed to heal. I needed to learn from you. I needed us to learn from you as well. And I know people who are watching this, you know, are Black, and some people are not Black, and they're learning about the Black experience and, you know, what Black people have to deal with, especially Black men. So I just want to say, bro, I appreciate you. And I'm going to have the links to all of your work. Chris is an amazing photographer. You can now play that a lot. And also his work in highlighting mental health in Black men is also one of the most phenomenal works that I've seen. So, bro, can't wait to have you back on. We're definitely going to have a part 2 of this conversation.
Absolutely. And, you know, I just have to say, I love what you're doing because you've always been someone who's always needed to have a platform because you have so much to share and you have so much to give. and you've always been a giver. And I think that's what's even made our friendship, our brotherhood work.
Yeah.
You know, you've given so much to me that I'm just like, man, like you've done so much, you know, in my life, you know. And so I know you've done that in other people. But I'm just honored, you know, to be a part of this platform on this day. Like this is an honor, you know, it's an honor to be a part of anything that, you know, you're connected to, you know, because I know it's going to be substance, it's going to be value. So I had to bring my A game because I know the standards that you got. So David got high standards, y'all.
You gotta have high standards, black excellence, like you would say, right?
Bro, yeah.
You know?
That's
so
right. That's
get
right.
the real thing. Get the real, you know, Tetek and the whole. Bro, we love you.
I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, bro. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, bro.
Yes, sir. Man. Talk to you soon.
Okay.